My name is Don Higgins. I was born in 1944 in St. Louis, Missouri. Actually, I was born in the elevator in the county courthouse because my mother and father were both in jail for kiting checks in St. Louis, Missouri. They both originally came from Lowell, Massachusetts. My birth father was like 42, my mother was 15, so it was a old-young relationship. After things cooled down for several years, my mother ended up back in Massachusetts. No telling what happened to my father. For many years, he went off to Ohio, got in more trouble, and my mother remarried to a very, very wealthy man. He owned many properties, apartments, so on. And I went to Catholic school, and we lived in I would call it a mansion these days. Back then, up on Nob Hill, there was a lot of mansions, but we had one of them. So you might say really had it made as a kid, but that didn't last long. As the years passed, things changed, and stepfather became a raving drunk, lost most everything, and then became a wife abuser, and then he beat my mother up, and she ended up in the hospital for several months, leaving us kids kind of in jeopardy. There was several of us kids, and he took off for California. Meanwhile, we fended for ourselves with a few relatives in Lowell, and eventually I ended up on a state farm. I stayed there 2 weeks, and then I hitchhiked to California. My other siblings went in orphanages, living with relatives, and so on.
Now, tell me about your other siblings. Who are they, and what were their names, and what just kind of describe them?
Charlene, using the name of Moody, which was his name. Albert, Paul. There was several, and they just ended up different places because that's what happens when a family breaks up. And one went to an orphanage, one went with relatives. Well, two went to an orphanage. One was half in the orphanage and then half with relatives. But it was a broke up family. I didn't like the farm they put me on, so I escaped and I hitchhiked to California, which is a long trip from Lowell, Massachusetts. And when I got to California, so many things happened in between that you could go on for days about that stuff. But
Well, tell me what happened. How old were you?
10.
And so tell me about, how old were you, and you left, and what all happened, as you can remember.
Oh, I can remember.
Well, tell what you want to tell. We might as well do it.
Well, I left with a friend of mine, and we got like a mile out of town, and he started crying. Yeah, go see his mommy. Oh, I didn't have a mommy at that time. She was gone. So she wasn't dead. She was gone. She left when she got out of the hospital with some other guy. And I hitchhiked to California. My whole purpose at the time, 10 years old, no brains, was to kill my stepfather for what he had done to the family and beating up my mother. So I finally made it to California. Stopped all along the way doing odd jobs, washing car windows at gas stations, all kinds of stuff. Anything a 10-year-old could do. And I got to California finally. And I linked up with my stepfather's brother, which I knew was out there, and I knew he was out there because that's where he would run to. And finally ended up where I could get proximity to him. And I knew he was a raving drunk. So he came home with one of his women one night and passed out. And I went in. I told the woman to get the hell out of the room. And she did. And I proceeded towards his bed with my hammer. But I couldn't do it. If I could have did it, life would have been different. I just could not do it. So I turned around, I left the room. 2 days later, I hitchhiked on a freight train. This was summertime in California. I hitchhiked on a freight train because the door was open. Figured, well, it was going east. So I got on that freight train and I went over the mountains in summer clothes and I froze myself to death almost. In one of the train stops, the guards come around taking a look, why is this door open? And that's like 4 hours later. And I was froze solid. They found me, took me to the train office, and proceeded to call the cops. Well, the minute I seen him on the phone going to call the cops, I booked it out of that train station and started hitchhiking east. And I hitchhiked east for about a week. Finally caught pneumonia. Ended up in Lowell, Massachusetts eventually, at the same friend's house where I had left. And he chickened out. And his mother took me in and called the doctor. Back then they made house calls. And the doctor said, this kid's got bad pneumonia. So you're going to have to either nurse him or put him in a hospital. So I got through that, ended up living with, he's actually a third cousin and his family. And, stayed with them for quite a while. We became right close. Meanwhile, many other things happened. I mean, I went to school, I did different things. And
Talk about school. Where did you go and what was it like?
I went to many schools. When I was in California, when I first arrived in California, there was a place called Sacramento Inn. And Sacramento Inn set up the conference rooms for the old Governor Brown, not the newer one. And I just was starving. And I walked in there and said, I'll wash windows, whatever you guys need. Well, Mr. Halliburton took me in. He managed the inn at the time. And he gave me a room, and he gave me a job, and he made me go to school. And so I did. He was like a foster father. And back then, everybody wanted to know where I was from, but I wouldn't tell them because they'd send me back to nothing. Well, I left, I didn't want to go back. So that was in between getting on the freight train and all the rest of it. That's just an in between, just a side note. Anyways, I would set up the Governor Brown's conference rooms, and they always had booze. So if it was Four Roses or Cuddy Sock or whatever they were drinking, I would take all the bottles of the same brand after the conference was over, mix them together until I had a full bottle. And then when someone in one of the rooms would call for a bottle, I'd go to the door and at the same time make believe I was twisted off the cap. Here you go, sir. So I had a sideline going even as a kid at Sacramento Inn. And from there, I went to the governor's ball because this guy was connected, of course, that ran the inn. and I ran into the Quackenbushes. And the Quackenbushes are heir to Borg Warner Gear Factory. And I dated the Mary Quackenbush actually for a year, and I got to go to strange things like the Governor's Ball. And I had a tuxedo back then, and paid for by Halliburton, and a chauffeur, black limousine. So kind of an insert, but it's nothing to do with the story in the long run. That's just an insert. And later on in life, I realized that I had to do other things. I had to make a living. So I really started making a living at Halliburton's when I was maybe almost 11 by doing my booze thing. And of course working around, cleaning up after the governor's conferences, stuff like that. And then I got into painting. There's an uncle there, my Uncle Jim, and the first project was a water tower. Now, you might think a water tower is easy to paint, but they ain't. Not with the equipment we had back in them days. You start at the top and you work your way down the sides, which is all ropes. And then you work your way underneath, which means you get painted as well as everything else. Anyways, we accomplished painting the water tower in about 2 weeks. And I was never afraid of heights after that, because what else could compare besides mountain climbing? So that was a benefit in the long run. And it was after that, remember I skipped to the freight train right away? Well, this is in between. A lot of in-betweens. But if you go through all the in-betweens, we'd be here for 4 days. And we can't do that because this is a video, it's, whatever. Needless to say, I've had a varied life. Would I trade any of it? A little maybe, but not much. Because it's a unique life. I've done a lot, seen a lot, been everywhere, United States wise. And no regrets. But when you get into later life, after I had hitchhiked back with pneumonia and got straightened again, I lived with that family, third relatives. For several years, we worked at Malden Mills. That they made carpets and clothing and all kinds of stuff before the mills all went south out of New England. And I was making good money. I was making really, really good money for a kid in high school. Go to high school, and then, come in and work at the mill for another 6 or 7 hours. So it wasn't like you go home and do your homework. It was like you go home and go to work at the mill, then you can do your homework. A little different setup than what most kids have today. Kids today are just got soft and mushy, in my opinion. Everything's given to them. They don't understand the concept of really going into the real world and really grinding your teeth and saying, I'm going to do this, and making a life. Well, I never had that concept because it was ingrained in me. I didn't have any choice. I mean, from the time I was 10, it was there already. I didn't have to go looking for it or be taught it or anything else. It was just there. So that makes things a little more unique to most kids today that are mamby-pambied all their life. Then they're thrown into the real world and they go, oh my God, now what am I going to do? Move back in with mom and dad, I guess. So, stuff like that I have no idea how that mindset works, because in my mindset, I never had that, upbringing. So that's how my upbringing went. And then we decided after a few years to go into the military. I had just turned 18, and of course many things in between. But just turned 18, and me and my third cousin decided to go into the military together. Well, I wanted to go in the Air Force, and so did he, but he didn't pass the test. So I went into the Air Force, he went into the Army, and we kind of separated over the years because we went to two different branches. And when I was in the Air Force, there's a lot of things I still can't tell today because if I do, well, it's illegal for me to say anything. But things happened in the Air Force that shouldn't have happened and should never happen in any war situation. But they did happen. I just can't talk about it. So I got out of the Air Force and I went to college. Mercer University, Macon, Georgia. And I figured, well, I can make something with my life. Well, I didn't have a high school diploma, so how the hell do you get into college? I only went to my freshman year of high school. But I was on a ministerial scholarship because everyone thought I had the credits. Well, I didn't. But I got in. Some preacher helped me. Anyways, I got into college. And I'm studying Greek and philosophy and Bible and all kinds of stuff. And I'm thinking, how am I going to use this? You know? I wanted to be Baptist preacher. Hooky-doo-dah. Well, I did end up, while I was in college, preaching at some country churches. Stuff like that. Nobody else wanted. And I'd go preach at a country church. And they'd try to give me money, but remember, Paul refused money. I wouldn't take any money. I'd just give it back to him and say, here, go buy some more hymnals or something. Never took a dime for any talk I ever gave up to this day. And believe me, I've given several hundred sermons, but never took a dime. Many of them sermons cost me money to get to the venue or whatever, because I don't believe in getting paid for doing something that's like that. You know, you spread in the gospel, well, fine, that's good. Why in the hell should you get paid for it? All these preachers nowadays, damn, if they don't get paid good, they go move to another church. I mean, I'm just telling you the facts the way it really is, not the bullshit that you see and hear. And people can believe me or not, but that's the truth. And the truth sometimes escapes people. They like to believe in the fantasy. And the fantasies are good. They make you feel good, you know. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to just say it. It's kind of like the Catholic Church. You go to confession, you come out washed clean. Well, fine, I can go sin again. I mean, you're not washed clean. You just bluffing yourself. Some man in a black suit said you're forgiven. That's bullshit. Only God forgives. So anyways, we do all this stuff in our religious, social, political, economic. We do all this stuff that's just meaningless and doesn't really help society. So if you really want to help society instead of hurt society, you better get back to basics. You got to get back to love your neighbor. You got to get back to help people that need help. You got to get back to honest politics. Ha ha ha. And then you got to get actually back to moral code. If you don't have a moral code, you don't have anything. You're a damn robot of the state. Because the only thing that made this country great was moral code. People believed that what was good should be taken care of and what was bad should be outlawed. Well, we still believe that in essence, but we propagate the bad, we reward the crooks. It's just not the same system. System has changed. Well, you might say I'm being cynical. Well, let history prove me wrong. And I doubt you can find it. Because the moral code has disintegrated. This country in the 21st century is just morally corrupt. We're corrupt in many ways. One is greed, the other is fear. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what FUBA is going to push the wrong button in some third world country. So people are anxious. And the anxiety that people live with today is screwing with their minds. That they look for escapism. Look at the drugs. Escapism. Let's just go do this, this, and this, and just keep doing this, this, and this, so we don't have to think about it. Well, you're going to have to think about it sooner or later, because when the country falls to its knees, there's not the time to think about it. So I'm going to get out of politics for a while, because that's what that was. I'm going to try to cut into religion a little bit. And I don't give a shit what religion you are, whether you're Buddhist or Islam or Jainist or whatever. It doesn't matter to me what religion you are. What matters to me is, what are you? And that's how I judge people. What are you? Because anybody can be any religion or say they are, and they have no spiritual value whatsoever. You know, they're doing it for business reasons, or they're brought up in the religion, or blah, 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 just go on forever. Real religion has nothing to do with what caste or sect you're in. What it has to do is what's in your heart and mind and your moral code. Well, we're losing heart, mind, and moral code, all three at once, because people just don't care anymore. And as long as they don't care, the downhill spiral continues. It started with many things, even before the internet. The internet made it worse, of course. People cannot communicate today like they used to. Used to be two people could sit down and talk and, communicate. Now it's text. It's false. It's fake. It's not real. You can't look in that person's eyes and say, I'm saying this, and see the reaction. Well, no, because you're texting or putting on silly pictures of stuff people don't even care about except you. It just doesn't make sense. But that's the way we're going. And then greed. Now, greed's a prime suspect because everybody wants a bunch. Not a little, they want a bunch. We got more than any other country in the world per capita. We want more and more and more. And they're starving to death and don't have houses to live in. And, we really think that the other thing is politically we think we can control the world. We can't. Shit, little Vietnam showed us that. Afghanistan showed a lot of people that, different countries. And our power is waning, as it well should. The way we've acted internationally, we deserve it. We deserve to have our power wane. So if somebody sees this video 50 years from now, they'll kind of get the idea. Think of Huxley way back, when he predicted exactly what we're going through. Think of Orwell, even before Huxley, which had a movie about it. Nobody paid attention. So when you get into the predictions and what really has happened since then, it's spot on. And you wonder, well, how could these guys know that? Well, they could see the trend. This is the way it's going. It's like watching Hitler's rise. This is the way it's going. People believe in bullshit. They're being pablum fed. And now you got a whole nation uprising against the world. Well, it's happened before. It can happen again. It's happening now. Only in different ways. Right now we think that, well, everything's copacetic. Everybody does this, that, in America. And it's not. It's all behind the scenes dirty pool. And that's my take on it. I'm going to get off politics again. I'll go crazy. But the truth is, if you know history, if you pay attention to history, and most kids don't even want to know history, their own history or any other countries. But if you pay attention to history, things don't repeat themselves. Things follow the same trend. And as they're following that trend, they modify it to fit their society. Now, in America, we've got more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. That ought to tell us something. Even some of the worst countries in the world don't have the per capita incarceration that we do, because we just lock people up for anything. And a lot of it's big business. Corporations are now running prisons instead of the government. And the corporations are for profit. I mean, come on. Open your eyes. If you can't see, there's something wrong with you, or you don't care. And I put it both ways. There's something wrong with you because you're stuck in the video games and all the rest of the bullshit, or you're doing escapism, going to any place you can go to escape reality. And if you don't pay attention, it's going to get you. How long before it gets you? Oh, well, it's already getting us. So it's not how long, it's inevitable unless we change. Are we going to change? Doubtful. Very doubtful. Because people don't want to lose their security blanket. Well, I was fortunate enough to have security blankets. I've seen the world as it was. I functioned in it as I had to. But at the same time, I tried to keep a moral code. We didn't play dirty pool. We just didn't. All through my life as a kid even, we didn't play dirty pool. We did it correctly. And we did it with some integrity, because we had integrity. Kids don't have integrity now. Whatever it takes to win is what they got. And so we have you might call it a generation gap. Kids love to do that. Oh, you're old school. Yeah, I am, thank God. Because I wouldn't want to be in the new school. On average. Now, overall, we got some very bright, intelligent, moral kids. But it's closing. The gap's closing. We ended up with more uneducated idiots than we need. Now, it's okay. If they're just dumb, make them a farmer. Give them a good life. But if they're brilliant, don't hold them back. And we do that. We hold back the brilliant, and we educate the dumb and give them, well, in this particular state, we give them a high school diploma. I mean, come on. That's not progress. That's not functional. That doesn't build a society. It just says anything goes and we're going to reward you for it. That's bullshit. Same thing with welfare. What we have third and fourth generation welfare people. People that just spout out kids so they can get more money. I mean, that's not morally correct. That's not societal helpful. All that is suck the government tit. And the government tit gets election results. And they don't give a shit as long as they get the votes. So watch yourself. If you don't pay attention to what's really going on, well, you're liable to be one of the ones that's enabling this kind of behavior. I'll be one that is this kind of behavior. So when it comes to behavior, that's a societal thing, and society makes its own norms. Most people don't realize that, but it does.
Let's go back to you talked about when you were 10, you went out to California, and then later you talked about 18 when you joined the military. Tell some of the stories that fit the gap, that from 10 to 18, kind of what you may have done, a few things that stand out.
Well, I did quite a few things back then. I told you about working in the mills. We were young, my cousin and I, we were young, and we'd go to the mills. And back then, you ran machines which made carpet and clothing. And when we were running the machines, you had to really move. So we'd go in there, and the old timers might have 6 machines. We'd go in and run 10 or 12 machines and piss them off, because we were agile, we were fast. And the idea on the knitting machines, is what they were called, was you had to be very fast because you had to clean the fuzz off the gears, wheels, and needles. And some of the machines would have 1,600 needles in them. And if the fuzz got in between the needles, it'd break the whole rack, the whole machine. So your downtime was pretty bad if you broke a machine. But we could run around like rabbits, keeping them clean. Well, the old guys couldn't do that. So they was mad at us because we was making twice the money. It was piecework. But anyways, we did that for a while. And then there was a company called Symphonics. Well, I got to tell you the funny part of that one. We did that for a while. And my machine broke down. Just one. Still had 11 going because I was running a bunch. Then another machine broke down. Then another machine broke down. And now I got pissed. I did something stupid. I took a ball of yarn and I threw it through all 12. Broke them all. I'm not proud of it, but it was funny. Because my cousin's down there running his machines. He said, "What did you do?" I said, "I quit." He said, "I quit too," and he threw a ball through his. And we walked out, and the floor manager is screaming at us. He wanted to kill us. But jobs were plentiful. And we fired ourselves, just on a whim, just by getting I don't know, one of those bad days, you just don't want to put up with no bullshit days. So the guy's name was Louis G. He followed us all the way out of the factory, screaming and yelling at us, and we're going, "Do what you can do, guy." A couple of days later, we get a job at Symphonics. Symphonics is probably still going. They started out making record players, radios, all kinds of electronic equipment. So we had another job. We're at Symphonics. And while we're at Symphonics, the girls are taking out turntables in their big purses, and we're putting together our own stereos off-site. We were stealing shit, yeah. And needles, ruby needles, diamond needles, stuff like that. One guy got the bright idea because alongside of Symphonics was a canal. There were trees growing right up against the side of it, right up against the factory. And there's a warehouse up there. So I broke into the warehouse, threw about 5 stereos out the window. And they hit the trees, get all broke up and whatever. And we go back in a kayak and pick them up at night. And we were selling damaged goods. We were crooks, okay? Of course, nobody admitted it, but that's the way it was. And after Symphonics, we went to work at different various small jobs here and there and whatever. And I was always a car guy back then. And we managed to get a couple of cars. One of the cars we had was Oldsmobile 88 convertible. And you gotta realize this is in New England and it's winter time, which means it gets quite cold. Well, our convertible had a top that wouldn't go up, no matter what you did. So we're driving around. First we gotta go out and brush the snow off the car. And we're driving from Lowell, Massachusetts to Lawrence, Massachusetts to work with no top. Like we're cool. It was cool, all right. Time we got there, it was frozen solid. But we had to look cool. Anyways, that's just different episodes. Finally, we were on the highway in the summertime with the 88. And some guy pulls up beside of us wanting to race. And we were all for it. What the hell, we're just teenagers. We blew the engine all over the place, all over the highway. They got rid of that car. Ended up with a 55 Mercury convertible. Now, this particular model, 55, 56, would corner any corner compared to the modern cars of that day. And it was in Vermont at that time. And that car, we didn't care about police because they couldn't catch it. Because the gravity, the center of gravity and the heaviness of the frame on this convertible just would hug a corner. It was that simple. And the police cars couldn't. So just for fun on weekends, we'd go out and run the police just for kicks. And then we'd scare the hell out of them by turning our headlights off. Because we knew the run and they didn't, or never had paid enough attention. We'd turn our headlights off and go from Windsor, Vermont to Claremore, Vermont with no headlights. But we knew what we was doing. We did it every day. And, stupid shit that kids do. Dangerous shit. Many, many dangerous things. There was a there was a big building called Mohair Plush. I think Mohair Plush is still in business in the South. They made thick carpets. And it's 4 stories up. And we always kept daring each other to dive off the building. It's like suicide. This is crazy shit. Who's going to do that? Well, stupid here decides I'm going to do it. Get up on top of Mohair Plush. And I know better than to dive. It's a damn canal. It's not deep enough. And I know better than to jump. I'll break my legs. So I go off and do a cannonball. That's going to amass most of the water and take the shock. And I survived. And then, of course, I got to call all my friends chicken because they wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't do it twice. Once was enough because I could have got killed. Then we'd do other stupid stuff. We'd go down the railroad tracks and flatten pennies and, just things kids do. If my mother knew what was going on, she'd have killed me at the time. But no, you don't tell the parents all the stupid shit you do. They'd lock you up. So that's some in-between stuff. It's just in-between stuff. Means nothing. Kids do what kids do. We blew up the grandstand. Shit, we blew up the school toilets. We blew up a lot of things when it come time to 4th of July. We didn't do just some firecrackers. We was in fucking bombs. We were blowing stuff up. And we went big time. And It's not the nice boy history, but everybody thought I was a nice boy. Oh well. Yeah.
So tell how we went from the military to raising families.
Oh,
Tell that story. How did we get from there to there?
well, because when I was in the military, I met a nurse at a hospital in Macon, Georgia. Okay? I can't say a lot about the military because they'll lock my ass up. Okay? Now, there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you privately, but not on that. So, yeah. And I met this nurse. I was in a hospital because I had a collapsed lung. I loved playing pool. And I smoked Robert Burns cigars. I didn't smoke cigarettes. And I burnt a lung out. So I ended up in a hospital with a collapsed lung. And she's a nurse, but she comes to visit the guy in bed beside of me. Well, the minute I locked eyes on her, I go, yep, I'm going to marry you. She just started laughing like it was, something crazy. I did marry her. But that went on for, I don't know, a couple of years, summers, so on. Started dating her, whatever. But that's a whole new class of bullshit because half of her family was black. Two different fathers. And back then the KKK was rampant, especially in Macon, Georgia. So they had to hide the black kids. So everything she learned in school, she had to take home, teach the black kids. And they both turned out fine as far as education, because you don't have to go to school to get an education. And one of them ended up managing one of them big factories down there. So it's a question of using everything you've got and having the balls to do it, instead of mamby-pamby and saying, hey, come help me. And, you pick yourself up, put yourself down, and do it again. And if you can. Now, if you can't, that's different, but most people can, they just don't want to. I'm getting back into politics.
Anyway, let's stay on the family history. That's what we're trying to get here. So you met the nurse. When did you get married? Was that Nina? I mean, tell the story. You lost me there.
Yeah, that is Nina.
Okay, well you didn't say that.
She was 15. I was 21 maybe. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, she was young. But I had made up my mind I was going to marry her in the hospital bed. Just one of those things. And I didn't marry her, but we went off to get married. We went off to the Alabama. I had a car, of course. And we get to Alabama, and of course, no minister's going to marry us because she's 15. Can't get a license, whatever. But we come back to the house in Macon, Georgia, and tell them that we are married. And her mother says, well, fine, drop her by the house. You can pick up her clothes and stuff. So I do, and that's the last I seen of her for years, because the mother shifted to Maine. Long part of that story. I went out there with the state police, highway patrol, everything. And because they're like, did you consummate your time together? I go, yeah, oh yeah, we did. A couple hundred times. Kind of a thing that, young teenagers type people would do. And so what happened then was she ended up in Maine. Her mother sent her up there. I did mention there was 2 black kids in the family. And of course they wanted to hide that from the state police and the KKK and all that. So they pretty much squeezed me out. From there, my sister's daughter died up in Vermont. And she wanted me to come up. And the kid was only a year old, crib death. So I said, sure. So I drove to Vermont. And in Vermont, I went to work for Cohn's Machine Company. Cohn's Machine Company ended up making the longest lathe in the world at the time for the Japanese oil tankers. And I ended up with the job as liaison with the Japanese because they liked me, I don't know why, to go set the machine up in Japan. Had to stay there 3 years. And I'm all set to do that. I'm ready to go. You know, things are rocking and rolling. And then I find Nina, or her mother finds me and puts us together. I'm thinking, oh shit, appropriate time. So Nina and I get back together. She leaves the guy that they sent her up there with. Supposedly her husband, which really wasn't. And of course she's got a kid, and the kid's mine. That was Butch. And I'm like, okay, can't go to Japan just yet. Can't do this, can't do that. Okay. So I just give it all up. And we're living together in Vermont, and no problem. And I'm still working at the pneumodynamics factory. And everything's hunky-dory, we think. Until one day I come home from work and there's big scratches on the wall saying, "Don, please help," which meant that he'd found her, which he did. I talked to the cops. And he had a legal right to bring her back. And, well, what can you do? So that kind of ended that for a while. And then I did something stupid. Because at Pneumodynamics, I had a work release program for Windsor Prison. And I knew a couple of guys on a work release program. And one guy had plenty of bucks stashed somewhere. And he decided that he was going to make a break for it. But he needed help from the outside. Well, I had one of them old cat's eye Chevrolets. And, but I needed something bigger because I had to break through the gate. I had to do it at a specific time that he would be outside the prison. Anyways, I got this big truck. I broke through the gate. I broke him out of prison. Well, he's got this other guy with him. And I said, that wasn't the deal. He said, oh yeah, he's cool. Yeah, right. So we end up in the Cat's Eye Chevrolet. And we're trying to book it through the 13 states, going south. And we get all turned around in Boston. And I finally just say, hey, wait a minute. There's no APB on our shit, so let's ask this cop up here. And they go, no. Yeah, so you guys got changes of clothes. We're just driving along. Let's ask this cop back here so we can get on Highway 1. And so I do. I stop and ask a cop. He gives me directions. Great. We take off. We're going to Florida. We're in Florida for about a week. Everything's hunky-dory. By now, the 13 state warning is what they call it up there, is out. We're not there. So we start heading west. Gonna go to California. They want to go to California. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. We're still driving the Cat's Eye Chevrolet. And cops stopped us several times. Our stories didn't match, but he had plenty of money. And that kind of took care of the cops. You understand what I'm saying? So, and which is true then, it's probably still true today. You shove enough money at them, they disappear from your life. And this guy was shoving a lot of money at him. So we get to New Mexico, Tucumcari area. And Stupid, which is the guy he brought with him when we broke out of jail, goes and steals a car. Brings it back, says, look what I got. Takes the tags off the Cat's Eye Chevrolet, puts them on this brand new car. So we're tooling along. I said, where'd you get this car? Oh, it was in a parking lot. I just hoisted it. I said, man, we was rocking along fine. Now someone's going to come looking. No, I changed the tags. I'm thinking, all right. So we get down the highway, just outside of Tucumcari. Blip, 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 blip. And I'm thinking, well, it's another damn cop to pay off. Nope. This guy's bringing us in. And I said, what gave us away? He said, you got a filthy tag on a brand new car. I said, yeah, genius did that. So we end up in jail. Them two are escapees from Windsor, Vermont jail. And we had it cooked up. If we get caught, they picked me up hitchhiking. Well, they stuck to this story, thank God, because if they didn't, they'd have got me for breaking them out. So, broke them out of jail. That's how that episode ended. And meanwhile, Nana's pregnant with Butch. And, you know, kids start coming. And that's just the way that is. So what really happened after that is I was pretty much on my own doing different things. My stepfather and mother decided to raise rabbits in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. So they had a rabbit farm there, which rocked along pretty good. They told me to, come visit. So I did. And then the rabbits got rabbit fever, just wiped them out. They were raising New Zealand whites, which were meat rabbits. They would send them mostly to New York City in big restaurants. And then, of course, they used the fur for other furriers. But basically, wiped them out. So I hung around there for a couple of years. Ended up working for a cookware company, putting on meals, selling cookware. And then married Pam Watkins, had several kids, and here we are today. I did a lot of other things in between and above and beyond, but at one time I ran 5 cookware companies. 3 in the state of Arkansas, 1 in the state of Tennessee, 1 in Texas. So,
tell about what was it like selling cookware. You go out into the home, or you'd have them, you'd cook.
Yeah, a lot of people are familiar with that. Old school people. You go into the home, you cook a meal, you show them how the cookware works, how it's more efficient, cleaner, all kinds of stuff is what you show them, healthier. And then you sell it to them if they want to buy it. And that's what I did for several years. That and put in offices, different places. I had one in Newport. I had another one in El Dorado. Had, of course, one in Higgins Springs for a long time, till Don Blair got there. Then I had one in Russellville. I had another one in some obscure town, but it was close to Memphis, which kept things rolling. And the company promised me the state of Tennessee. I had grown big enough. and they didn't have anybody. And they promised me the state of Tennessee, so I moved 2 of my offices to Tennessee at great expense. Because I had to move the families too, and all that. And myself. But I opened up Tennessee, got it rolling. And then they cut me off at the knees. So we can't give it to you. And I didn't find out till 2 years later that it was my own people in this state of Arkansas that was overriding everything I've sold that stopped that because they wasn't making any money off me anymore. And they finally got it stopped. It took them a year or so. And that was illegal as hell, but the president of the company said, Don, I don't know how to tell you this, but, we'll set you up somewhere else. I go, nope, you lied. You promised one thing, you lied about it. I'm done with you. So I quit. And I told all my men in all my different offices why I quit. Well, shit, within a week they'd lost over half of them. Within a month they lost all but 2 or 3. Because people believed me. It wasn't bullshit, it was the truth. And they didn't want to work for a company that would do that to somebody. And so that was the end of that business. Then I went into my own businesses of real estate. So real estate in Florida, California, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. So I've sold a lot of real estate. But then I got into fixing homes. And found it was a little more profitable than real estate and a lot less aggravating. So I got into remodeling, which gave me more time, my own hours, more flexibility. It kind of fit me. So I started doing that. And one of the things I did was to learn burn down roofing. And there's a company called Tech out of Texas. And they were just playing with me. I didn't know they were playing with me, but they put me on a crew here in Arkansas, Gravit, I think. Yeah, Gravit. And it was a big building, and the Tech rolls weigh about 105 pounds, 110. And they had straight ladder going up the side of the building, built in, iron ladder. And my job was to carry these rolls up on top of the roof, so the guys up there could, burn them down. And I'm thinking, this is one terrible job. But I do it. And after I'm up there, maybe 30 rolls. I forgot to tell you this. There's a parapet wall in between that's 4 feet high. Got to go over the wall with the roll and not damage the roll. Very strenuous thing. Anyways, I did it. Had a family to support. So along comes the boss. He sees me doing that. He says, "Who the fuck are you?" "I'm Don Higgins. I talked to you on the phone. You said I could come and start today." "Yeah, but what the hell are you doing?" Some guy said to bring rolls up. "You're foreman up there," whoever the hell he is. He said, "Shit." He goes up there and chews the guy's ass up because they're killing me. And down below, they got a forklift to do that stuff. But they're just testing me out, right? They figured I'd quit. They wanted me gone because they're all potheads, every one of them. They knew I wasn't. And it was bad. I ended up running that crew. I ran the whole fucking crew. Ended up going to Kentucky. Damn factory there. What is it?
Keep going.
They made cookware too. I guess it was, Where of It, that was it. A Where of a plant that was just full of asbestos in the roof and so on. They needed the roof tore off and a new roof applied. So we go down there with about 12 people. What a nightmare. Because what you don't realize is asbestos gets in your skin, in your eyes, in your ears. Just gets in everywhere. It's nothing but dust coming up into you. So a couple of guys last a week. That's bullshit. They're going home. So he gets all kinds of lotions and creams, and it doesn't stop it. It still gets in your eyes and lungs and nose. So we start hiring locals to fill in for him. The locals ain't any better. They last not even near as long. Anyways, finally get that job accomplished. And after that, just started working around here. Did a lot of roofs around here. And that was kind of my start on roofing. And then I got out of that because it's a tough job. I was getting too old, I thought. So I end up remodeling, which ends up back to roofing. You know, you're still stuck with it. And by that time, Mike's old enough to join things, and he starts, taking over.
Tell me how you went from, you said you married Pam, had some kids, but then you guys got divorced and later you got remarried to Nina.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tell that story. How that all happened.
Pam and I get married. I met her selling cookware to her parents, and we end up having Michael and Bridget and Ricky and Ryan, 4 children. And how do we get back to Niner and my other son, which everybody called Butch? His name's really James. How do we get back to that? Well, Butch ends up in rehab. Back then rehab was for anything. In his case, it was just pot. So he ends up in rehab, and Nina finally decides to tell him who his father is, because the guy that's there is obviously not his father. So she tells him. Well, so he wants to meet me. And he decides, well, I'm going to come to Fort Smith. That way I can pick him up. Which he does. He comes to Fort Smith, and I pick him up at the airport. And Pam, my wife at the time, was saying, well, we need a DNA test because I ain't going to believe it. I'm going, fine, I can tell you the history, but you want a DNA test, we'll do a DNA. Well, the minute he steps out of the car, she says, forget the DNA test. I said, what do you mean? He's obviously your son. I said, yeah, obviously. We even got the same voice box. So, go for that one. And anyways, we just, we drifted apart over moral issues. So because my first son is here, I reconnect with his mother, which is Nina, which was, the first woman I was with. So her marriage is on the rocks. So she wants to come down and meet me. And I'm like, fine, come on, mine's on the rocks too. Which I'm not going into why, but it is. And so we hook up again. Well, that starts a cascade. A year later, Butch is already here, James, and he's working in lighting and controlling and stuff like that, which is his job. And then Sue, her daughter, comes down. And she's working in hotels. And then her ex-husband comes down. And believe it or not, he ends up going to work for me. And ostensibly trying to get Nina back. Of course, that didn't work. He's an asshole. A big plus double A asshole, if you knew the whole story. So, belongs in prison. But anyways, now her extended family is here, except for one, which is still in Maine. And Nina ain't leaving me no matter what. And she went through hell. She did go through hell. But she wouldn't leave. And we didn't have any more kids. We only had Butch. James. So anyways, meanwhile, I got to get the hell out of the state, which was a good thing in the long run. So she's got a little money, I got a little money. And we decided to go to North Carolina. Well, first we decided to go to Maine because we had a big Cadillac. And she had fabric that you wouldn't believe. One of them big U-Haul trailers of fabric. And, thousands and thousands of dollars worth. She wanted to go get it. So we go up there. We stay with a good friend of mine. The one I was going to go to California with, and he chickened out. We stayed with them for about a week. And then we decided we're going south. So we took off and went to, we ended up in North Carolina. As a side note, while we're there, these people are super religious. And while we're leaving, the guy's wife says, well, I need to bless you before you go. And I go, fine. She says, well, I mean your car. That it makes the trip all right. Because you're loaded down and you got a trailer and do whatever you want, lady. So she does. We're 100 miles out and first thing happens is a blown tire. So, shit happens. So we got another tire because that one was not worth fixing. Then we travel south. We're going to North Carolina or Florida or some damn place. But we're getting away from Arkansas. So we end up with all kinds of mishaps on the way with the car. Everything keeps breaking down. And Nana looked at me and says, well, it's a good thing they didn't bless us. Because this car is a mess. So we end up in North Carolina. And we got a bunch of fabric in a broke down car. And I'm like, well, gotta do something. So we kind of middle around. We end up in this little bitty trailer. I swear you could cook in the kitchen and have your feet in the bed at the same time. Just a little bitty trailer, which cost almost nothing, which is what we could afford. and built up from there. I went to work for a boat company, and the boat company was one of the biggest powerboat companies in the world, Fountain Power Boats, ran by Jesse Fountain. And I spent quite a bit of time there at the boat company building boats, speedboats, power boats. We built boats for Ayatollah Khomeini's family. And these boats had to have pilots. You can't just throw somebody in them, they'd kill themselves. So we had to train pilots for the boats. And if we put 3 engines in a Khomeini boat, we it would outrun anything on the ocean. The highway patrol, not highway patrol, but border patrol, the Navy, we give them 2 engines, but that's what they asked for. Well, they couldn't catch Khomeini's boats. Anyways, we built Kevlar boats. We built boats that were invisible to radar. All kinds of boats. And I worked with them for a couple of years. Pretty much had a good thing going. And then trouble started over here with the kids and all kinds of shit. And so I said, well, probably go back at least for a month, see what's going on. So I told Reggie I got to go back to Arkansas. I got some family things to take care of. Reggie said, okay, but you get your ass back here as fast as you can. I go, yeah, I will. Well, it didn't work out. I ended up back here in Arkansas. Meanwhile, I've got Nina with me. And different things happened throughout the family and so on. But I left everything to my ex-wife, including the house. So I never got a dime, never got my clothes. I think she burned them up in the backyard, which was her due. I didn't care. That's another story. Anyways, I didn't expect to walk into anything good, and I didn't. So it took a while to get managed, and then we're back to again where everyone starts moving down after we moved here the second time. And then her ex-husband going to work for me and then trying to kill me, which was a prerogative. And you want to hear about that incident? Okay, we're going up on this really steep roof, and I'm going up to repair shingle damage because I'm not afraid of heights. So we got this rope going over the top of the roof because I'm doing shingle damage on the other side. And he's down there supposedly tying the rope and making damn sure nothing slips. That ain't what he was doing. He was making sure everything slipped. And the homeowner happens to come at that time. And he looks at that and he goes, what the hell? He says, that ain't gonna hold him. Saved my life. Because he was wanting me to fall off that roof. Another one of his weird ideas of getting Nina back. So anyway, I escaped that. Then he tried it another time at burn down roofing thing we did up in Rogers. Didn't work either. And then he left. Haven't seen him since then. I guess he figured if he tried it again, I'd kill him. But I wouldn't. It's just the idea that the guy could get that manic, come all the way down here to do me in. So, yeah, it's life's been a little bit exciting, but at the same time, you take it in stride. A little bit this, a little bit that. Uh, by the time you get my age, you realize what's important and what's not. Or at least you should if you have a brain. Some of them never do. Some do. But when we're talking about posterity, which is what this is for, uh, posterity, make your own posterity. Make it your way. Try to be honest. Try not to be a goof up like I was. Try to be moral. Just about everything I did, except a few robberies, I was moral. And then the robberies I ever did never hurt anybody, except me. So, yeah, I've been through the gamut. And don't break people out of jail. You know, some of the things I've done look like maybe they're exciting, and they are, but they ain't worth it. It's where people start losing touch with doing things right. And then I got into religion, which that's a big can of worms. Now I'm not irreligious. I believe in the cosmos. I believe in the Creator. I just don't believe in all the dogmas and doctrines and rules and regulations and bullshit and lies that religion purports to control the masses. And they all did, and they all do, and they all will continue to. So, as far as religion, be spiritual, don't be religious. Big difference. Believe in God, help your neighbor. Do the things Jesus said, but don't become a parrot of paragraphs in the Bible just because you happen to learn them. Because you don't even know what you're talking about half the time. And I do, because I spent 40 years with it. So you can believe that or not, I don't care. I'm just telling you the truth. And that's the way it is.